Okay, so let's get started. This is the second tech tips group, and uh, Catherine from Delaware and Fallon from where?
Now North Carolina.
Now North Carolina is joining us. So Catherine, let's start with you. You were just saying that for the past week you've been coaching yourself and your patients on um, how to use telehealth. What would you say is the biggest problem you've kind of come up with that you want us to try to help you with?
Clients' anxieties about technology and their own capacity. Most of my clients are my peers,
Yep.
which means we consider ourselves somewhat tech challenged.
Yep.
And so once I've been able to talk folks through the process and they've connected, it's worked really well.
Yep.
It's the anxiety of getting there
Yep.
that seems to be the hassle.
Yep.
In fact, I've been really quite pleased with the sessions themselves.
Yep.
And have been telling folks that it's just that most of us experience, or many of us experience, a fair amount of frustration learning new technology.
So thank you. That is such a wonderful lead-in for something that I think is really important to talk about clinically. And it may not be the direction you think I'm coming from.
I'm open.
But bear with me. So let's talk about ageism. Let's talk about all the messages people in their over 60 and up are getting, not just about COVID-19, where we're now kind of, dismissing sometimes COVID-19 because we think it's just older people. But this is just another version of the ageism that has happened with folks in terms of technology, which is this idea that older people can't learn it, or they're too stubborn, or they're too rigid, all of which is not true. And in fact, when there was some interesting stuff on the Pew Internet Research site about a decade ago, which talked about how people that were age 60 and up were actually better adapters than the boomers were, because they had more time at home to be practicing things. Now, one of the things we've noticed about how oppression happens, and we've noticed in terms of racism, but it's applicable to ageism here, is that there's an emphasis, there's an aspect of any ism, which is what we call systems beating, which is when the oppressed population figures out that they can actually, in some way, use the system of oppression to kind of beat the system. So for example, a lot of older folks who are very capable of learning technology, but have been taking in all these messages about how you can't do it, you don't know how to do it, you're too dumb, it's too late, you're too rigid. They not only internalize the stuff, but they also start to use it as a way of getting out of it, as a way of saying, oh, well, I really...
It's avoidance.
Yeah, it's avoidance, plain and simple. And as therapists, we know about avoidance, and we know how to meet it head on. And so one of the things that you can do with older adults is to first and foremost say, I know change is hard, and also I know that you're capable of this. And it may be one of the first times that somebody tells an older person that they are capable of using technology. And that's a really important first intervention. The second tech tip I would offer here is to be doing the first session or two sessions with sort of an on-ramp of using the phone as well. That a lot of times when I work with older patients or older clinicians, we have the phone right there so that they can be calling my office number. And as long as I'm in control of muting so that there's not this weird feedback, I can actually talk them through Zoom. And to have that once or twice, I think is really helpful for a couple of reasons. One is, no adult is so old that they don't know how to use a telephone. and that they are finding telephones cutting edge technology. So that's actually very familiar. The other piece of it is what I kind of take from my object relations training, which is the importance of a transitional object for anyone that's going through a heightened anxiety state, whether it being an infant that needs soothing, or somebody that's having a panic attack, or somebody that is older that is feeling anxious about adopting a new technology. So I would really encourage you, when you're communicating with your patients at the beginning, to say, my phone number is going to be this. I'm going to have it right online, and we will, work to get you onto whatever your video conferencing is, by using the phone first.
Mm.
And usually by the second or third session, those folks are all set with it. And then I get the other thing
Well,
is,
I have
go ahead.
found,
So, and Fallon, if that's you, can you put your phone on vibrate?
So I put my phone on vibrate, but it's ringing through my computer. So I'm just trying to figure out how to get it to stop doing that.
Okay.
So the phone is good. I checked that, but I'm trying to get my computer to stop ringing as well.
Okay.
I have
Catherine, go ahead.
been, since I've used the phone to talk people through the process of accessing the web office,
Yep.
I hadn't thought of it as a transitional object, but that's a wonderful thing at it. But the phone audio was not synced with the computer audio.
Yes.
So it was very helpful to have your suggestion about I can mute it and
Yes.
just listen on the phone, mute it on the computer and just listen on the phone.
Right. While you're doing both of those things back and forth, you're going to need to kind of keep an eye on what's making it easier for you to understand people.
Right.
And that is also a really powerful intervention, that you can be saying to some folks, this may be clunky, while I may have to shift audio, but it's all in the service of my being able to understand and hear you better. That is such a powerful therapeutic communication anyway. The other recommendation that I'm saying so far at every Tech Tips session that I want to say again to you is, one of the biggest things you can do to improve the quality of your patients and your therapy sessions online is to make sure that you are not wireless, that you have your computer plugged into an Ethernet cable.
Okay.
And depending on what your computer is, if it's a MacBook or if it's a newer computer, you may need to get an adapter. But are you familiar with what Ethernet cables look like?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so if you look at this, are you on a laptop right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you look at the side of your laptop, hopefully there is a plug that looks like a kind of bigger version of a telephone plug.
Possibly. It's a round one.
Okay, so it's a round one.
No, the only thing I have USB ports and one round one, which I would have thought would have been
Looks
for
like
earphones.
Fallon is modeling. So,
I don't have that on this
it
computer.
looks, sort of like what a phone cord would look like, but a little bit wider.
yeah.
Right. No, I know what that is, and I don't have that on this
Okay.
MacBook Pro.
So let's assume you're going to be needing to do this for the foreseeable future. And let's assume that right now your computer speed is about a quarter of what it could be. And so what you want to do, what kind of laptop do you have?
A MacBook Pro.
Okay, perfect.
And it's fairly new.
Okay, so I have exactly the link for you. And I've actually been sharing this a lot lately. But there are things called MacBook Ethernet adapters. And the one you're probably looking for is what we would call the Thunderbolt to Gigabit Ethernet adapter. And so I'm going to link that in chat for you.
Okay, great.
Because just because you don't have that right now doesn't mean you don't want to go out and get it. So if you look in
Right.
chat, this is a link to Apple that actually sells their particular one. Now, if you look on the side, you probably have some smaller kind of ovalish looking
The
USB sort of.
USB-C, isn't it?
Yep, yep. So so what you want to do is you want to look for the kind of Ethernet adapter that's going to connect to that,
Right.
and you're going to want to do that and order it on Amazon or Apple, and then you can also have this information available for your patients. Their lag happens in two places generally. One is on our side as the therapist, and the other is on the patient side. And so, for folks that are not financially disadvantaged, they can for about 20 to 30 bucks order a combination of an Ethernet adapter and a cable. Even if they don't, we certainly can, and then we've cut down on half of the lag. Now, this is always important. It's important for two reasons. One is even though HIPAA compliance is currently being suspended in terms of the current pandemic, in the future, we're probably going to see a return to best practices, including HIPAA compliance. And wireless, even with a level of encryption, is technically HIPAA compliant, but in terms of privacy, wired cables are always more private. They're all, and what's more important from my point of view is that they're faster. And so,
What does that mean, wired cable?
Wired connection, rather. So
okay.
Ethernet cables, things that the signals are going through and the data is going through a wire, is always more secure and fast than beaming it through the air from where you are to your router.
So what is the difference between Ethernet adapter and my normal charging?
What is the difference between the Ethernet adapter and what?
And my normal charging cord.
Oh, so really good question. They're absolutely different. So adapter is a much more general term, which is basically to help one plug or input adapt to a different plug or input. So
Right.
Power adapters are designed to adapt your computer to get power from your electric outlet. That's that adapter. Ethernet
Right.
adapters are for you to adapt your wired internet connection from the router to your computer. See, right now, the way
Got it.
So right now, for those people,
I'm wireless at this point.
That's right. And so that's what we mean when we talk about wireless. And that's why I'm glad you brought it up for people that are going to watch this after we're done. Wireless is always slower. And so you're always going to be experiencing more lag. And so I'm sure during some of your sessions, you had moments of frustration where the patient was in the middle of telling you something and they froze up.
Yeah.
Or you had this really great interpretation and then they were like, I didn't hear it. So because in our work, relation and connection and language are really our tools, we need to make sure that it's as fluid as possible. So that's why you want to get Ethernet cable. My Ethernet cable, which you can't see, is probably 500 feet long because I want to have it so that I can go anywhere in the house with it. If you know that your work center where you've set it up is going to be probably only 10 or 20 feet that you're going to need, you can get a shorter piece. But the trick is to get a cable.
So this has to connect in with my router?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Now, what that means is if your router is down, so can you show us in your office right now where your router is?
It's not in the office. It's in a very different part of the house.
Okay. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to run it from where you are to where your spot in the house is, unless you have cable upstairs where you can put your router upstairs, right? And so this is something you can do. This is something that like if your house is wired for cable internet, I mean, I'm assuming you're in a home practice. Is that the
Right,
case?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
great. So is there a cable outlet in your office right where you
No.
are? No. Where would the closest one be?
In the living room, probably 50 feet away.
Okay, so you want to get a cable that's maybe 50 to 100 feet. Now, I'm really encouraging people to think in terms of COVID-19 and telehealth as different things. And this is a good opportunity for me to kind of tell you this. You didn't ask to do telehealth. This is something you're getting onto largely because of COVID-19. So if what that means is for the time being, what you've got is an Ethernet cable that you're running out a window and running in your living room window downstairs. If that works for you for the next little bit, that's great. But the other piece of this is getting ready to do telehealth for the foreseeable, for forever. If you want to move your practice to telehealth forever, then you're going to start needing to think of longer term goals, which is getting a cable place, what's the word I'm looking for? Getting cable wired up into your office so that your office can have a router. Doing things like that. So you're going to hear some short-term solutions and tips here, and then the longer-term solution and tip. And I think that this is important because you're going to notice really quickly if you're getting a lot of lag, and you really want to cut that down as much as possible, right?
I agree. Okay, well, that was very helpful.
Well, that's great. That's the point. So Fallon, why don't you jump in? What are some things that you've been wondering about or concerned about?
Well, you answered my first question, which was Ethernet versus wireless.
Okay.
Part B to my question was, if we do connect with the Ethernet cable, do you find that other people using the wireless, and a lot of people are teleworking from home, so it might not just be us in the house, but other, our kids are using the wireless, our, families are using it. If we have the Ethernet cable, is there still potentially interruptions in signal strength because of other people using your internet?
Okay, so this is a really interesting question. The answer is it depends. It depends on, so first off, if you are starting to transition to working from home as a home office, one of the business expenses you want to risk incurring is you want to call your local internet provider and you want to get the business level cable. So you want to make sure that you've got the highest megabytes per second that you can coming into your house. But that's because what you're doing is you're basically now using your home for not one person's workplace, but maybe two or three, as well as maybe two people's schools for our clinicians that have family members. So there's some tech stuff you can do, which is make sure that your family and your home environment has the highest bandwidth that your provider gives you.
Okay.
The second is a period, and this is more COVID-19 related. You're going to have conversations with your family members about the new normal in terms of work-life balance. So for example, what are lower bandwidth activities that kids can be doing when mom and dad and mom and mom and dad are at work? Because streaming Netflix is going to take a burden on things. And, so you want to be able to come up with a list of high bandwidth and low bandwidth activities. And you want to do it before you start seeing patients if possible.
Right.
So that's one thing. I think that would be the communication. I think it's also important whenever possible, while we're talking about this, to be wearing headphones if you are working at home, because patients need to know that what they're saying is not being heard by, two other people and three adolescents. And so, if possible, you want to be able to kind of give some headphones. Now, having said that, my headphones the batteries just died. So I'm going to have to take them out. So what I would, if I was modeling an ideal practice, I would have my wired ones ready to kind of get popped in. but I don't. Unfortunately, this isn't a therapy session, so I'm just going to use my speakers.
Okay.
Okay, but what my point is that this is really something that you're going to have to talk with family members about and come up with lists of high-fi and low-fi and high bandwidth and low bandwidth activities.
Okay. Yeah, I guess part 3 or part C, I don't know letters, to that question is, when I do teletherapy sessions, I will notice aloud to a client when I'm noticing an interruption, because generally my signal is quite good,
Yep.
and I'm noticing an interruption on their end. To
Yep.
either they've frozen mid sentence, or I'm hearing just breaks in their communication.
Yep.
Would you recommend that we also kind of talk them through that, like, hey, before your sessions, it would be helpful if other family members could not use your Wi-Fi? I mean, because our clients are not going to be able to necessarily upgrade their cable,
Right.
nor are they necessarily going to be able to go out and get an Ethernet cord for their own system. And I have even some clients that don't have laptops, so they're calling from they're
Their
using their
phone.
phone.
Right.
And so it seems to help like a little bit, but I'm wondering if there's anything else that I should be coaching them on in terms of other people in the home using the internet while they're in session with me.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I think, let me go back a little bit, because I think what you're highlighting is a couple of things that are probably going to be really challenging for clinicians to be doing as we move to telehealth. Clinicians are used to having their own office, and maybe you educate patients about the lock to get into the waiting room, or how to wait and they can help themselves to a tea or whatever. But now you're going to need to be offering technical recommendations. And that can feel really uncomfortable for therapists for a few reasons. One is we may not feel competent or qualified to give technical recommendations. And part of why I'm mentioning these things is that hopefully as you think about it and reflect on it and try it, you're going to feel more qualified to say, hey, here's why a wired connection is what I'm really asking you to get, not a wireless. The other thing that is really hard for therapists that we don't do in our normal day is recommend products and suggest patients buy them. That can really feel a little ethically uncomfortable, a little bit like a conflict of interest. So, I understand that to a degree when I, give people a link to Amazon or to Apple, that I'm suggesting that they buy an Apple or an Amazon product. And you can certainly speak about that to patients and say, this is by the way why I don't have any Zoom stock. And as of last week, I was really, would have loved to have had some Zoom stock, but I can't use it. I can't invest in Zoom because it's a conflict of interest for me, because this is the product that I suggest people use. So you have to be mindful that you're asking patients you're recommending patients buy stuff in order to connect with you,
right,
in a way that's not what we normally have done. But that's just the way it's going to be, in my opinion, so that you can understand them better. And what you can sort of say is, hey, if you want to call in on your smartphone, I'm going to continue to show up for you and I'm going to do the best I can. I can only do so much if you are not, if you're not able to hook up to a wireless, a wired connection. Now, having said that, there are some things you can also suggest to patients, which is if you can't have a wireless connection, can you move right to the router? Can you get closer to the wired connection? Because every wall that signal has to beam through is cutting down on the receptivity. So really what you can do is encourage them to be proximal to the router. You can also encourage them to move the router to a more central place. And so that's the tech part and the product part. Now, in terms of family stuff, that's a little bit more, I think, where we need to take a step back and actually be clinical first, which is to say, okay, how is your family handling these resources? Because one of the things in therapy we're always talking with patients about is family conflict over resources, whether it be parents' attention or money or sex or whatever. There's always a finite amount of resources a family system has, and they're always struggling about them, whether it's dinner or what kind of food or anything. So technology is no different. And our job as a clinician is first and foremost, I think, here to take a step back. As long as you can hear me and I can hear you, tell me how your family is adapting to this change in family resources. Okay. I can tell you that I had one family, I did a major intervention when I started doing online therapy with the adolescent. And the major intervention was to get them to get their higher priced plan. That they really didn't want to spend more money, but suddenly they had several kids all streaming or playing videos or doing homework, and the family was trying to commute. And so it turned out that for $50 a month more, huge family conflicts started to diminish. So where this has been easier for me than some clinicians is I've always been a big fan of throwing money at a problem if we can solve it. Like with couples therapy, I always in my intake with couples have said, I'm happy to work with you. I recommend that you have, if possible, you get a dishwasher and have someone come in to clean twice a month, because a good percentage of your conflict will decrease just by doing those things. I have no problem with throwing money at problems if it's something that socioeconomically is feasible. And so what I think you'll notice is if you can encourage patients to take the plunge and do this, it will help. And you know what's interesting is I think we do it with patients all the time, but we don't think about it that way. We say, hey, you know, why don't you get massage therapy? You know, I know you're single. I know you're feeling like devoid of contact. Pre-COVID, we would recommend massage therapy, which was often, you know, $100 a session or something like that. We should feel no different, I think, about recommending increasing their cable access, their bandwidth, any of that stuff, because really, again, it is literally fostering connection. And one of the things we're noticing with COVID-19 is a huge strain is going to be placed on our internet infrastructure. And we need to kind of remove as many of the sort of the clogs in that system as possible.
And I guess my follow-up comment that I would have to that, now that there's been some more guidance on waiving the HIPAA requirements, I have had a session that it just really wasn't going very well due to the connection on the other end, and we ended up switching to FaceTime for the remainder of the session, you know, which generally is not considered HIPAA compliant. But, you know, I think even just having a backup tech solution, if you're not, you know, because you don't want to necessarily spend the whole session troubleshooting either, because it gets hard to tolerate, just switching to some other platform available, or just phone.
Fallon, you're right on target. So what I would say is a couple things. One is give yourself a cap of 10 minutes. And if it's taking more than 10 minutes, go to the phone. And then the second thing is, remember, this isn't either or. I can mute myself on Zoom and you can call me, or I can call you. And the reason I think that's important is a couple of reasons. One is in terms of when HIPAA compliance comes back, using the phone and using Zoom are still HIPAA compliant, whereas using FaceTime, not necessarily so.
Right.
But the other reason is you don't have to go right to phone. And I think, again, those of us who are a little reluctant to try new technology is like, okay, we tried 10 minutes, let's go back to phone. It is much more holding for the patient in terms of attachment theory, for them to be hearing your voice and seeing your face.
Right.
So even if you're frozen or you're slower on the screen, but they can hear your voice, that is better than just hearing your voice and nothing on the screen. So again, you can scale back. My policy is generally I don't have as much problem now because most of my folks are trained how to use Zoom now. But if we are having lag and it happens more than 2 to 3 times, I will suggest, you know what, let's just turn off the sound here and let's do the rest of the session on phone. I don't want you to miss out,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay.
And I think that's a real powerful intervention. I think it's a way of saying to them, hey, I understand that, you know, connection with me is important on a number of levels, and I don't want you to miss out because of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I find
Go ahead,
it
Catherine.
not only important for clients to have visual contact, but folks to be able to see the client, which
Yes.
has been a problem for me on the phone in that I'm very easily distractible. And face contact helps a lot.
Catherine, you're absolutely right. And you know what? Clinicians need to fess up about this. Part of nature is wise. Part of why face contact really facilitates attachment is because we get instant feedback when we start to break face contact. And so what that means is if clinicians start moving entirely to the phone rather than video conferencing, they may get a text and go, oh, well, I'm going to just check the text, or, you know, I can multitask. And that's partly state-bound learning. We are much more used to multitasking when we're on the phone than we're on
Definitely.
Zoom, right? So in fact, this is a chance to build in good habits, and that when I'm Zooming or doxying or whatever, I don't do this, like multitasking. And in fact, you know, one of the things, Fallon, you've already alerted us that you need to do is you need to unhook whatever is connected between your phone and your computer, because in fact, it's causing a cognitive disruption for you.
Right.
It's interrupting you. While we're talking about attachment in the phone, I'm going to say the same thing I usually say during these tech tips, which is remember that when I'm looking at the camera, you think I'm looking at you. And when I'm actually looking at you, you do not feel connected to me by my gaze. So what you need to remember is those differences. And you need to be, as the clinician, the person that decides, okay, when do I need to track the patient's affect? All right, I'm tracking Catherine's affect right now. She seems engaged. She's a little amused that I mentioned her name. I told her she brightened a little bit when I said that. Nothing emergent seems to be noticing that I need to notice right now. So I can look at you, Catherine, and now you're feeling more attached. Now you feel like I'm attending to you in a different way. You need to be able to do that with your patients. When they are in extreme distress, you know that they're in extreme distress, so you stop looking at the screen. You don't need to keep looking at the screne. What they need from you is you looking at the camera. And that is really
Very
counterintuitive, and it's one of the most important basic skills for telehealth providers to get to.
I have wondered that.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder what they're seeing when they look at me. Another provider mentioned that it's helpful for her to, when using Zoom, turn off her own the image at the top where she can see herself. Because she felt distracted by her own facial expressions and the way that she looked on camera. And so to just, you know, cut that video, that's not necessarily distracting for me personally, but I can see where other folks might not, you know, they're like looking at, oh yeah, my hair's fine. And then back to the client.
I've got mixed feelings about that. So first off, for people, like if you are in speaker view, and if you look for Zoom, if you look in your upper right corner, if it says speaker view, then you're actually in gallery view. But if you want to toggle to speaker view, what that means is that whoever's talking will be the person that you see. Unless, for example, I don't know, I don't know if for some reason you're bigger in my screen right now, but basically, if you're on gallery view, what you see is everybody in an equal square, and whoever's talking, there's an illuminated frame. Speaker view is better for clinicians who are focusing on one-on-one people, I think. And the nice thing about speaker view is you can adjust the size of the screen, so that right now the person speaking is really, really big and my own screen is really small. I don't like to get rid of the screen entirely. And the reason I don't like to get rid of the screen entirely is I like to be able to tell if for some reason, welcome back, Catherine.
Hey, thank you.
If for some reason my screen freezes up, I
Yeah.
want to be able to notice it. So, but if you're a clinician, especially if you're used to the classical model where you're not the looked at object and you don't want to see yourself, you can minimize yourself. But I wouldn't totally remove yourself because you could end up inadvertently being muted or something and not even know about it.
That's true.
So when you go to speak, when you are on the computer anyway, you can adjust the size of your own screen relative to the person that's speaking screen. So.
Mike, I had a question for you about running groups. And since you're recording and posting, I'll just note that I'm in a DBT practice. So, certainly running groups is just part of what we do. And so we want to be able to continue offering groups. I have a professional license for Zoom, but it doesn't include the webinar add-on. And I'm wondering, is it appropriate enough to just create a group meeting like the one that we're in where I can see all the group participants, or do I necessarily need the webinar version?
I don't think you need the webinar version.
Okay.
I also don't think I would create a group just like this. And let me be careful how I say that. With this particular group, people that have the link or see the link can log on. And I tend to think that just like when I get out of my office and go into the waiting room and invite people in, I think I need to send out individual invitations to the group.
Okay.
I don't think it's that laborious. Most of us aren't doing groups with more than 10 people. But I do think that, it's important for us to continue to sort of email them individual invitations to join the group, not just have a waiting room where they're all, where anyone can pop in. So I do think your current capacity, I think if you've got the professional, you can do between 50 and 100 people in your meeting.
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't think you need a webinar for that at all. But I do think you need to be sending out individual invitations 5 minutes before the time of the meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the reasons I was curious about it, because I was noticing in just webinars I've attended on Zoom that when they screen share, I can see both the presenter and their presentation. And so for things like group, if we want to, put our worksheets up and have them still see us. But I think in a meeting, I have to screen share, but then you don't see my face necessarily. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you just reminded me of another thing I need to say about groups. But I think you can screen share, but it's going to mean that you're not visible. And so in fact, what I would be more likely to do is, I would be more likely to, if it's DBT, for example, I would share the download link in chat for the worksheets or the info and let them download it themselves rather than do it on the screen.
Yep.
More important for you though, Fallon, as the group therapist, you want to at least part of the time, and a good part of the time, be switching from speaker view to gallery view, because you need to be scanning the whole group to see if anyone's having unusual affect at certain things, if certain people seem distracted, if the whole group seems to be kind of dissociating. So this is an example where, as opposed to individual, gallery view is much more clinically indicated, I think, because you need to be tracking your whole group.
Can you distinguish between the two, please?
Yes. So are you on a computer right now? You're on a MacBook, right? So if you go to, so right now you should be seeing me big on the screen. And then if you bring your mouse to the upper right hand, you'll see something that says gallery view.
Right.
That means if you hit it, you're going to toggle gallery view.
Okay.
So what that means, Okay, so now are you seeing all of us in equal squares?
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
and do you notice how as long as I'm talking, I'm illuminated?
yes.
If you do group therapy, you want to spend a lot of time in this particular one
Hmm.
because you can still see who is speaking, but notice how you can track, well, Fallon's still paying attention, Mike's talking, or so-and-so looks upset, this person seems to have checked out. So for group folks, you want to do gallery view at least a good part of the time.
Mm.
And I would argue that you want to do it most of the time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? So, and where this will become really, really obvious really quickly is if you have a group where there's one dominant member of the group. Because if you're in speaker view, everyone's just going to be seeing that person. Well, isn't that a parallel process to group dynamic, right? So one of the things you also want to perhaps mention to other people is that they in the group turn on gallery view as well.
Ah,
Right?
yep.
And you want to be able to say, hey, you know, occasionally I'm going to throw in a tech tip. This is one for you with other group members. I really encourage you to spend some time, if not all of your time, in gallery view so that you can see all of your fellow group members. If you are using speaker view and you notice that you are tending to be really the person in speaker view a lot, maybe you want to think about how much you're contributing to the group. You know, those sorts of interventions are things we do in group therapy all the time,
Right.
but I think we have to add the technology piece about which view to use. Right? And isn't it an interesting clinical parallel process, by the way, that it's like helping members in the group learn how to shift from the I to the we perspective, how to kind of see themselves in relation to a larger whole.
Mhm.
Mhm. I have a separate section question from therapy. I've been using Doxy.me for my
Mhm.
sessions,
Yep.
and I'd like to know how you compare the two platforms. But I'm also thinking about using Zoom for a group meeting that I will be having that is usually it's training judges for
Mhm.
camera club competitions.
Okay.
And so we evaluate images,
Yep.
score them, and then share the relative merits of the image.
Okay.
How could I, on Zoom, how could I project an image onto the screen that everyone would see?
So if you go to the bottom of the big picture right now, you should see something that says share. And,
Yep.
and you would click on that, and then a window will come up with all the different windows you could be putting
It
things.
says share screen.
Yep. And then if you
Yeah.
click on it, it will show, you could do screen, you could do whiteboard.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is you want to have the file up with all of the images that you're going to use, and that you would be posting each one of those. And what you would probably want to do beforehand is you would probably want to load them all into one thing, like a PowerPoint or something that doesn't reduce the quality of the images, but so that you don't have to like have 20 different files that you're sharing.
Right.
Right. Let me go back and answer your first question about DoxyMe versus Zoom, and that the answer is I can't really speak to that, and it's because I don't use DoxyMe. That doesn't mean I don't think it's good. It means I don't have anything really to say about it. What I do have an opinion on, and it's a fairly strong one, is pick a technology platform and stick with just one, because you don't want to have to try to explain to 5 different groups or patients 5 different platforms. And you know, if DoxyMe can actually do some of the stuff that you want for your judging, I would encourage you to go with that as opposed to buy another product.
Huh.
Because honestly, you don't want to have to be learning yourself. Because, you know, a button may be over here in Zoom, but it's over there in Doxy, or you may not have a certain feature. Stick with one thing. I will say this, and I've said it before, I think that Zoom is not necessarily doing a good job advertising that they offer HIPAA compliant products for smaller clinicians and smaller
Do
groups.
they?
I
That's
don't,
why I went with Doxy.
right. I think that you saw the scary $200 a month thing. And my experience is that that is not, mine is HIPAA compliant, and that's not what I've got. I'm not paying $200 a month. So I think that that is their marketing for larger hospitals.
Right.
But I think that if you want a business associate agreement and a level of HIPAA encryption on a Zoom product that's smaller, that if you contact their sales department and have a customization meeting, you'll get that. So I obviously I don't get kickbacks from Zoom. I'm not affiliated with Zoom, but I do think it's the most robust platform in two ways. One is I think it is HIPAA compliant, and after this comes back, these restrictions, we're still going to be able to
Right.
use it. But the other is it's got a much larger critical mass of users than Doxy or some of these other ones. And the larger the critical mass, the easier it is to familiarize people with it, and the deeper the pockets you generally have for customer support. So you don't want to just get a product, whatever you choose, that only has a user group of like 3,000, because they can't afford to have 24/7 customer support. So look at the products and look at them in terms of, do they have somebody that's there at midnight when I have a problem?
One thing I
That's
would
very
add
helpful.
too is you might want to test some of those platforms like with a colleague, just because when you get the invitation to join a session, some other platforms require you to download something first.
Right.
And the nice thing about Zoom is that if you don't have Zoom on your phone or on your computer, you can join via your browser.
Right.
And I have found that that is really even just I met with a provider via Citrix or some other platform, and it required me to go through all these steps to download it and then make myself an account, and there were just so many steps in order to getting care that Zoom doesn't have. You click the link, you're in the session. So I don't know what your platform does for
Doxy
the end user.
You put the address in the what do you call the address bar, and doxy.me/Catherine Harris, and it takes people right to my virtual waiting room.
Okay.
So it's very direct, which is really nice.
That's really good, and that's a really important point, Fallon. And for people that are watching this after our stream, part of why that's important is that anytime that something needs to be downloaded has a client that needs to be downloaded, you've added a level of complication in terms of what you're going to have to talk people through, because some people may have a Mac, some people may have a smartphone, some people may have an iPad, some people may have a PC. All of those clients are different. So they're going to need to know how to download the one specific to their service. You're going to need to know how to help them with each one. And that's the last thing I'll say about this particular piece. I do think you have a responsibility, if you are using a specific platform, that you have a certain amount of ability to educate people about how to use it, which is why it needs to be simple enough for us to understand it. Because you can't say to somebody at the beginning of a session, oh, go to Zoom and tell them that you're a patient of mine, and they're going to get you set up. This isn't like your front desk's billing office receptionist deal. You need to be able to take responsibility to a certain extent about whatever platform it is, even if it's, gee, I don't know, let's go to phone and I'm going to figure this out before our next appointment. All right? And you do have to anticipate you're going to be doing a lot of homework, and you need to. So we're getting close to 4:30, and I want to just check in with people that I'm going to plan on a stop at 4:30 unless we have tons more questions. So were there any other things that were pressing or things you're concerned about?
I just wanted to know if you have posted last week's session on YouTube.
I did. And so if you go to my YouTube channel, which is in my signature on my email, but let me, for you guys, let me put it in chat. so that you can see it. And this also has my email and everything else, and you're very welcome to be in touch with me. But if you look at the last link, it is my YouTube channel. And if you go there, you'll be able to see my videos. And the last week's video will be there, and then we're gonna process this one, and you guys are all gonna be celebrities in a little bit of time too.
I have one hopefully last question. I'm not sure if this is actually better for your support group, or if it's a tech question, but I'm thinking about some clients where I've had like multiple interruptions in a session, such that, you know, we either ended a session early or the session didn't really it didn't really have substance. And I'm just curious your best practices about billing, you know, when the you know, if the interruption is mine, you know, I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that falls to me to make sure that my technology is what it needs to be.
Right.
But after we've already communicated all these things and expectations to the client, you know, whether or not they follow through with our recommendations, and then they're having multiple interruptions in their treatment in a session, do you still bill?
Okay, so I think this
normally would.
Right, that's a good question. And I think this goes back to what I said about my policy of let's tinker with this for 10 minutes, and if it's not working, let's go to the phone. Or we've had two interruptions so far, let's go to the phone. That if you have it built into your kind of own practice that you've got 15 minutes of technical static, and if it goes to the 15 minutes, you switch to phone, then you are still delivering some quality of care and continuity of care. There have been times when I may have waived a copay or waived a partial fee, but there should be no reason why people aren't able to use their phone to make up for the changes in video camera. So with that, I tend to bill people. I tend to say, let's switch to phone so that you get the value for, you know, my services.
Right.
But I would definitely come up with some specific hard and fast ideas of your own. And then again, as any limit or billing with our patients, it's always part of the therapeutic invention, right? So patients are going to experience us as rigid or confused or flaky or want to get more from us or not want to trouble us or be afraid to confront us about things. All that stuff is grist for the mill. So I would invite your patients to let you know if they've got concerns about it, but I would build in to your frame, if this is not working by 10 minutes or 2 interruptions, I want us to go to phone so that you and I can continue to work. And then of course you bill.
Right. Okay.
All right. Well, great. So spread the word. We have 2 more groups that you or colleagues might be interested in. And those are as follows. We have tomorrow from 3:30 to 4:30, the provider support in COVID-19, which is much more focused on clinical and emotional support for caregivers. And then on Thursday from 3 to 4, we have educator support for folks that are going online with teaching and are feeling overwhelmed and want non-technical but more emotional and social support. Thank you guys for being here. And if you joined us after the fact, thanks for watching Tech Tips. We're here every Monday, and hopefully you'll join us soon.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.